Alright, up next, Book 11. So the Land of the Dead is location number 8 for Odysseus. So this is the 8th location that he's tried to get to. Well, technically 7th because Troy was first, but on his way home. So theoretically, when he goes to the Land of the Dead, and if he can find this guy Tiresias, then Tiresias will give him all the information he needs to get home safely. Since we know that he's not going to make it home until location like number 16, obviously something's going to go wrong. But let's see what Tiresias has to say. So, starting at the top, in the Land of the Dead, Odysseus seeks to learn his destiny. The source of his information is Tiresias, the famous blind prophet from the city of Thebes. The prophet's lack of external sight suggests the presence of true insight. Circe has told Odysseus exactly what rites he must perform to bring Tiresias up from the dead. Odysseus continues telling his story to Alcinous' court. So just a couple things from this section. First off, Tiresias, I've mentioned that he can see the future, but in a little ironic twist, he is actually blind. So he can see the future, but he can't, see. Of course, he's dead, so he's not doing that much anyways, but still. The other thing is Circe mentions that Odysseus must perform certain rites, certain rituals, in order to bring Tiresias up from the dead. I don't know if any of you guys have been watching the movie version of the Odyssey as you've been reading, but just a warning, the ritual that is referred to in this section is the very common Greek practice of animal sacrifice. So there is a little fluffy sheep that is going to die if you watch the movie bit. So prepare yourself emotionally. But anyways, in the reading, Odysseus also does make a sacrifice, but, a little less graphic here. So when Odysseus gets to the Land of the Dead at line 584, then I addressed the blurred and breathless dead, vowing to slaughter my best heifer for them before she calved at home in Ithaca, and burn the choice bits on the altar fire. As for Tiresias, I swore to sacrifice a black lamb, handsomest of all our flock. Thus to assuage the nations of the dead I pledged these rites, then slashed the lamb and ewe, letting their black blood stream into the well pit. Now the souls gathered, stirring out of Erebus, brides and young men, and men grown old in pain, and tender girls whose hearts were new to grief. Many were there too, torn by brazen lance heads, battle-slain, bearing their bloody gear. From every side they came and sought the pit with rustling cries, and I grew sick with fear. But presently I gave command to my officers to flay those sheep the bronze cut down, and make burnt offerings of flesh to the gods below, to sovereign death, to pale Persephone. Meanwhile, I crouched with my drawn sword to keep the surging phantoms from the bloody pit, till I should know the presence of Tiresias. Soon, from the dark, that prince of Thebes came forward bearing a golden staff, and he addressed me. Son of Laertes and the gods of old, Odysseus, master of landways and seaways, why leave the blazing sun, O man of woe, to see the cold dead and joyless region? Stand clear, put up your sword, let me but taste of blood, I shall speak true. At this I stepped aside, and in the scabbard let my long sword ring home to the pommel silver, as he bent down to the somber blood. All right, so, little gruesome, lots of blood going on here, but Odysseus is making several sacrifices, and he's also promising future sacrifices just to make sure everyone's covered. Obviously, he's making the sacrifice for Tiresias, but just to cover himself, he is also making a sacrifice to the gods of the underworld. Because typically, if you go into the Land of the Dead, you don't come out. So Odysseus is one of the only Greek heroes in mythology to enter the Land of the Dead and then exit with his life. So he makes an offering to sovereign death. So sovereign is a word that means king or lord. So the god of the dead, who you may recall is Hades, of course, and to pale Persephone. So Persephone is the goddess of the underworld. She's Hades' wife, I guess. So anyways, So he makes sacrifices to them, makes sure he's covered. Tiresias comes forward and, drinks some lamb blood. It's a little gross. And then he gives his prophecy. So, let's see, hold on. Lost my line. Yes, so at line 617, he's about to tell Odysseus what Odysseus needs to do in order to make it home safely. Then spoke the prince of those with gift of speech. Great captain, a fair wind and the honey lights of home are all you seek, but anguish lies ahead. The god who thunders on the land prepares it, not to be shaken from your track, implacable, in rancor for the sun whose eye you blinded, the Cyclops. One narrow strait may take you through his blows, denial of yourself, restraint of shipmates. When you make landfall on Thrinacia first and quit the violet sea, dark on the land, you'll find the grazing herds of Helios, by whom all things are seen, all speech is known. Avoid those kine, hold fast to your intent, and hard seafaring brings you all to Ithaca. But if you raid the beeves, I see destruction for ship and crew. Though you survive alone, bereft of all companions, lost for years, under strange sail shall you come home, to find your own house filled with trouble, insolent men eating your livestock as they court your lady. Aye, you shall make those men atone in blood. But after you have dealt out death, in open combat or by stealth, to all the suitors, go overland on foot and take an oar, until one day you come where men have lived with meat unsalted, never known the sea, nor seen sea-going ships, with crimson bows and oars that fledge light holes for dipping flight. The spot will soon be plain to you, and I can tell you how. Some passerby will say, "What winnowing fan is that upon your shoulder?" Halt, and implant your smooth oar in the turf, and make fair sacrifice to Lord Poseidon. More sacrifices. A ram, a bull, a great buck-boar. Turn back and carry out pure hecatombs at home to all wide heaven's lords, the undying gods, to each in order. Then a sea-born death, soft as this hand of mist, will come upon you when you are wearied out with rich old age, your countryfolk in blessed peace around you, and all this shall be just as I foretell. On his way out of the underworld, Odysseus sees his mother, who he did not realize had died. She took her own life out of grief because Odysseus had been gone for so long. So, kind of a tragic end to that, where Odysseus gets the information that he needs, but then on the way out, he's like, "Mommy, why are you here?" So, unfortunately, Odysseus' mother was so upset that he had not returned that she took her own life. Not good, but at least he got to see her one last time, I suppose. So, back to Tiresias' prophecy. So, let's see. Obviously, there's some difficult things ahead for Odysseus. Okay, important bit. So, if you look at line 624, Tiresias says that one narrow strait may take you through his blows. And notice how strait is spelled, S-T-R-A-I-T. So a strait, when it's spelled that way, refers to a very narrow waterway. So imagine that you have like a continent over here, and then maybe like another continent or a large island over here, and there's a little bitty waterway that goes in between them. That is the strait that Tiresias is referring to. So since Poseidon is the god of the sea, probably he's more powerful in the open ocean. So I think the idea is that if Odysseus sails through this narrow little waterway, perhaps Poseidon will not have as much power, or at the very least, the little waterway is a shortcut for Odysseus and his men to get home. So, step one of the prophecy, Odysseus and his men need to sail through the strait. They need to sail through the narrow waterway. Step two, after they sail through the narrow waterway, if you look at line 626, there's an island that's mentioned there, Thrinacia. Thrinacia is an island that is protected by the god Helios. So if you look at line 628, you'll see Helios' name. Helios is the god of the sun, and Helios happens to have some pet cows that he likes very, very much. The cows are magical and immortal, as long as they are not killed. So Tiresias says that, when you get to this island, then you can't mess with the cows. Don't even look at them the wrong way, because if your men kill these cows, then Helios will make sure that you do not get home with your men and your ship and all that sort of stuff. Now, we know from the invocation, if you watched my video on that Odysseus' men do end up eating the cows, and it ends up leading to their death. So it's interesting knowing that there was a prophecy that told them, don't eat the cows, and they end up eating the cows anyways. You'd think that if a magical blind prophet said, don't eat the cows or you'll die, then that would be the last thing that you would be trying to do. But we'll have to figure out why Odysseus' men do end up eating the cows in Book 12. Okay, last bit of the prophecy. Line 632, Tiresias says, if you mess with the cows, which we know they're going to, then ship and crew will be destroyed. Odysseus will survive alone, bereft of all companions, so he won't have any of his friends with him, which we can see. And then eventually, in line 635, he will get home, but under strange sail. So he will not get home on his own ship. And he will find trouble. Men eating your livestock as they court your lady. So we've already met these guys. These are the suitors that Tiresias is referring to. So he predicts years ahead of time that Odysseus' house is going to be filled with a bunch of guys who are trying to get with his wife and who are eating all of his food and being just generally rude human beings. So Tiresias says, if that happens, then you got to kill him. So the end of the Odyssey is going to get quite bloody. So we are going to have to deal out death to all of the suitors. That will be Odysseus's plan. So anyways, that's the prophecy. Yay, Tiresias.